I started this business in April of '81 is when I went into this business. Been doing it ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fun job. I have a smart-ass son. I have a crazy dad. And then we sit around and argue all day and help customers make money.
What if the most successful moment of your life was built on your greatest failure? That was the reality for Richard the Old Man Harrison, a man who survived a failed real estate business, a choice between the Navy and jail, and the immense grief of losing a child before he ever stepped foot in the gold and silver pawn shop. He was simply known as the Old Man. But that nickname carried a weight few understood. To the millions who tuned in every week, he was part mentor, part comic relief, and part living time capsule of American grit. Yet behind the jokes, the sharp suits, and the quiet one-liners, there was a deeper story. A man who lived through hardship, built an empire from nothing, and left behind a family and legacy complicated by love, business, and the brutal honesty that made him unforgettable. This is the story of Richard Harrison, how Pawn Stars began, why he mattered so much to it, the controversies that followed, and how his final days marked the end of an era.
What do you think you most learned from him?
Oh yeah, definitely work ethic. I mean, he went to work every damn day.
How many sick days?
Well, I mean, I don't really remember, like maybe one or two a year. I mean, max.
Born in Danville, Virginia in 1941. Back when the town smelled like tobacco and old wood, Richard Harrison came from nothing but grit. His family didn't come from money. In fact, like many Americans during the mid-20th century, they lived on the edge of survival. At 17, he had an experience that would forever alter his life. He stole a car, a reckless decision that arose from economic desperation and limited options. He even said himself in a naval proceeding that he had no choice. And of course, he was charged to court. And the consequence of that action is either to be sent to jail or to join the US Navy. He picked the Navy. 20 years at sea gave him not just a paycheck, but discipline, resilience, and that famous unflinching stare. Those who served with him described him as a man of few words, but steady hands. He ultimately achieved the rank of Personnelman First Class, PN1, a testament to his leadership and administrative skills. After further service on 4 ships, he later became a Navy paymaster. It was in the Navy that he met Joanne, his first wife, who stood by him for more than 5 decades. Medals followed: good conduct, Armed Forces Expeditionary, Vietnam service, and national defense. But for him, the medals were less about parade uniforms and more about the mindset. Show up, stay present, don't give up. However, life had more bad surprises for them. When the first daughter, Sherry Joanne Harrison, was born with Down syndrome, medical expenses quickly engulfed them in debt. This state of financial deficit led Richard Harrison to re-enlist in the Navy to obtain healthcare benefits for her medical condition. Although Sherry died at 6 years old, this move defined him and his entire demeanor later on in his life. He also had Joseph, Rick, and Christopher while he was still in the naval service. When he finally retired from the Navy, he tried his hand at real estate with his wife, who already had a real estate office in North Carolina, but luck wasn't on their side as the economy collapsed around him. Broke and desperate, the Harrisons moved to Las Vegas in 1981 with little more than their car and whatever cash they could scrape together. That desperate gamble would eventually lead to television gold. In the early 1980s, Las Vegas was not the glittering mirage it is today. It was a city of hustlers and survivors, the perfect place for a man like Richard Harrison. Together with his son Rick, who inherited his father's stubbornness and sales instinct, the two opened the Gold and Silver Coin Shop in 1981. Rick had a vision. He wanted to turn the family business into something larger, something that would outlive the constant cycle of buying and selling. By 1989, they had secured the state's first pawn shop license in Las Vegas, and the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop was officially established. But success didn't come overnight. Harrison and his son worked grueling hours, 7 days a week, often barely breaking even. It wasn't glamour, it was honest. Their store became a magnet for tourists, gamblers, and locals trying to turn quick cash into hope. But Rick was still not satisfied. He knew having a TV show centered around his shop means more visibility and, of course, more money. And with that goal, he began to sell his ideas and propositions to television networks and media houses. The television networks continued to reject him year after year until 2009. Finally, the History Channel took a risk that year, resulting in one of the most popular reality TV shows to date, Pawn Stars. And right at the heart of it all was Richard Harrison, the no-nonsense patriarch whose wit and wisdom made him an icon. When Pawn Stars premiered, Richard didn't say much, and that was exactly the point. The other casts of this show were his son, Rick, who was the talker and of course a co-owner, Rick's son, Corey, who was the impulsive young gun who started helping out at the shop at the age of 9, and Chumlee, Corey's friend, the clumsy and comic sidekick who came to help. In the missile attack, Chumlee decides to spend $5,000 on a 1986 Buick Regal. He takes a thrilled Rick, Corey, and the old man with him to pick it up. The old man's reaction to the car and to Chumlee's decision to buy it is a classic example of their back and forth.
That's the most stupidest thing I ever seen in my life.
His catchphrases, "You're an idiot," usually delivered to Chumlee, or "That's your problem, not mine," often used to cut off a seller's sob story, became pop culture gold. They showcase the gruff exterior of a man who viewed his work as a business, not a charity. But behind that TV persona was a patriarch struggling to keep his family together. The gold and silver pawn shop was both their home and their fame, a blurring of lines that would later be tested by success. For Rick, it was an answer to his own dreams, but for Richard, it was an entire lifetime's education broadcast to the world. He didn't want to be famous, he just lived with it. But without him and his gruff demeanor, Pawn Stars wouldn't be the same show. His existence in the series was the quiet anchor, a reality check for the audience and his family alike. Amidst all the modern antiques and comic books being sold, he was the one who revered the past. Viewers got a glimpse of this in moments like when a 2,000-year-old Roman coin minted after Julius Caesar's death came into the shop, or when a valuable collection of silver briefly pulled him out of his chair for an inspection. These items made the audience realize that the stories mattered more than the transaction. TV success stories are always full of cracks. As Pawn Stars reached the status of a phenomenon with over 7 million viewers within its slideshow, fame and money challenged the togetherness of the Harrisons starting around 2013. Fans began to notice the subtle shifts over the years. Rick became the face of the franchise, appearing in interviews, brand deals, and spin-offs, while Richard slowly receded into the background. Then came the rumors, small, persistent, and often exaggerated. Some tabloids suggested that the old man had been pushed aside as his health declined. Others claimed the family disagreed on money and creative control. While no major public scandal erupted, the tension was real enough to make its way into fan forums and entertainment columns. The most public controversy occurred in 2012 when both Richard and Rick were sued by a Vietnam veteran who claimed they had assaulted him at the store. The legal details were never fully settled in the public eye, but the incident added a layer of complexity to the family's image. By the time Pawn Stars entered its later seasons, Richard's health was visibly declining due to Parkinson's disease. A neurodegenerative disorder that affects movement and speech had begun to slow him down. The man once known for his sharp wit and brisk walk now appeared frailer, quieter. Producers gradually reduced his on-screen appearances, focusing more on Rick, Corey, and Chumlee. Fans noticed, and questions flooded online forums. Where's the old man? Is he sick? Rick, protective as ever, later explained that his father wanted privacy. He didn't want to be remembered as weak or dependent. His final years were spent surrounded by family, still visiting the shop occasionally, still insisting on knowing how things were running. And then, in 2018, a quieter controversy emerged, one that caught the public off guard. Richard Harrison passed away on June 25, 2018, after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. He was 77 years old. One of his last public appearances was a short cameo filmed months before his passing, in which he smiled, nodded, and said, "You never know what's gonna walk through that door." That line, once just a catchphrase, felt like a quiet farewell. The world of reality television mourned him. Tributes poured in from fans, fellow veterans, and celebrities who admired his unfiltered charm. After his death, Rick released a heartfelt statement on an Instagram post. "He was my hero, and I was fortunate to get a very cool old man as my dad. He lived a very full life and touched countless lives through the show, the shop, and personally." But just weeks later, court records revealed something surprising. In his final will, Richard had specifically excluded one of his sons, Christopher Harrison. Maybe because he never contributed to the pawn shop, but Rick confirmed the news publicly, describing it as a private family matter, but insisted the decision reflected his father's wishes and not malice. The original will had named his wife, Joanne, and his 3 sons, Rick, Joseph, and Christopher, as beneficiaries. However, a 2017 amendment specifically stated, "I would like to express my love and affection for Christopher Keith Harrison. However, for purposes of this will, I have intentionally and with full knowledge failed to provide for him and his issue." Those who knew Richard best, however, weren't surprised he was practical to a fault. A man who believed in consequences and responsibility. If he felt a family member hadn't earned something, he He wouldn't pretend otherwise, even in death. Then came lawsuits. Richard's widow, Joanne, filed a lawsuit against Rick Harrison, alleging mismanagement of assets, improper ownership transfers, and a lack of transparency. Rick called the claims sad and unfounded. The case settled quietly, but cracks in the family's business were revealed. His net worth at the time of passing was estimated around $8 million, built not only from Pawn Stars, but from decades of work and investments. He left behind not just wealth, but a name that carried the weight of an American archetype. Tough, principled, imperfect, but real. Even years after his passing, Richard Harrison's imprint on Pawn Stars and on television itself has refused to fade. The show didn't just reshape the image of Las Vegas, it redefined what reality TV could be, as ordinary people became cultural landmarks through nothing more than authenticity and hard work. In the years since, Pawn Stars has continued, but fans still say something's missing. The chemistry remains, but the heartbeat is quieter. The gold and silver pawn shop still stands on Las Vegas Boulevard, now visited as much for nostalgia as for pawn deals. In a corner of the store sits a tribute, a framed photo of Richard Harrison, smiling faintly, surrounded by the things he loved most: family, history, and a good deal. The show has since expanded into Pawn Stars Do America, traveling across the country to explore local treasures. But wherever the cast goes, Richard's spirit seems to follow. Rick often speaks of him in interviews, saying that not a week goes by without fans mentioning how much they miss the old man. Beyond the camera frames and the laughter, Richard Harrison's legacy is defined by the millions of viewers who tuned in to learn about history and value. His constant refrain, "Let me call a guy who knows about this stuff," turned the gold and silver pawn counter into a first stop for verification. This simple, repeated act taught millions to value provenance over hype and to look at their own belongings through a historical lens. In that sense, Richard Harrison's life offers a potent lesson about success. It is rarely glamorous. It is built through quiet discipline and the kind of repetition, the same phrases, the same appraisals, that turns a local pawn shop into a national phenomenon. From a broke Navy veteran who lost his real estate business to a television icon, his story embodies a version of the American dream that mixes sweat, stubbornness, and just enough luck to find a camera crew. His strength on screen was his authenticity, a rarity in modern television. In a world of scripted drama and artificial emotions, the old man stood as something solid and real. When he passed away, the Pawn Stars family didn't just lose a cast member, they lost the moral compass that kept the show grounded. Even now, years later, reruns of Pawn Stars still draw millions of views across streaming platforms, just as if Richard Harrison was there, waiting for someone to pitch an impossible deal. From a man who drove a school bus at 14 to an enlisted sailor who served aboard destroyers, his journey wasn't glamorous. It was a grind, but the facts speak for themselves. The little gold and silver coin shop he started with $10,000 grew into a global landmark, and the show he anchored became a juggernaut, peaking with over 7 million viewers per episode and becoming the History Channel's highest-rated series. He proved that authenticity resonates more than polished charm, building a televised empire based on the principles of a hard-working pawnbroker. The viewer's loyalty wasn't instant. It was earned through his gruff honesty and his consistent insistence on knowing the facts behind an object. And he left us a warning, too. Fame is fleeting, and he saw it come and go. The complexity of his life was revealed in his final decisions. Deals can falter, as they often did when a price couldn't be met. Families can fracture, a truth made public with the intentional exclusion of his son Christopher in his final will, and the subsequent lawsuit filed by his wife, Joanne, against Rick regarding asset management. But what you build with your principles endures. Richard Benjamin Harrison Jr. died in 2018, but what he built hasn't. And maybe that's the measure of a life well lived.
Gambling can be a disease, just like alcoholism, drug addiction. I don't gamble. With my dysfunctional family and running this place, that's enough of a gamble for me.